This morning, terrorists and the threat of more terror attacks are on everyone's minds. A new documentary looks at the CIA's role fighting terrorism. How far will it go? How far should it go? In the Spymasters, CIA in the Crosshairs, all 12 living CIA directors are interviewed. Think about that. In this excerpt, intelligence agents say they warned the White House of danger to the United States before September 11th.
Cofer Black, a legendary operative, had escaped an assassination attempt by al-Qaeda while serving in Khartoum.
The first week that I was in the counterterrorism center, a new chief comes in, and they stick you in a conference room, and all the people start coming in and briefing you on their areas of activity. I don't shock easy, but I was shocked. This was a wave of threats coming at the United States.
In the spring of 2001, we submitted authorities to the incoming Bush administration and essentially advocating a paramilitary operation. And the word back was, we're not quite ready to consider this. We don't want the clock to start ticking.
The crisis comes to a head on July 10, 2001. Richard Blee, the head of the bin Laden unit, barges into Cofer Black's office.
He comes in and he goes, okay, roof's falling in. I said, great, what you got? The information that we had now compiled was absolutely compelling. It was multiple sourced. It was sort of the last straw. We decided the next thing to do was to pick up the white phone, call the White House, we're coming down right now.
I said, Condi, I have to come see you. It was one of the rare times in my 7 years as director where I said, I have to come see you. We're coming right now.
Present at the July 10 White House meeting are National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice and other top officials.
So Rich started by saying, there will be significant terrorist attacks against the United States in the coming weeks or months. The attacks will be spectacular. They may be multiple. Al-Qaeda's intention is the destruction of the United States.
I said, this country's got to go on a war footing now. I sort of slammed my hand on the table.
What happened?
Yeah, what did happen? Yeah, what happened?
Essentially, nothing happened.
Yeah, that's right.
Condoleezza Rice would later write, having raised the alert levels for U.S. personnel abroad, I thought we were doing what needed to be done.
If on the 10th of September we'd been able to walk into the President of the United States and say, we think U.S. airliners are going to be hijacked tomorrow. Just think about it. If we had been able to give him that very specific piece, as the president, he may very well have held all the airliners from flying. Until when?
If you don't put a system of defense in place, if you don't button up your airports, button up your buildings, change your visa policies, have some knowledge about what's going on in the United States, you're going to get hurt.
Chris Whipple is the writer. He is an award-winning former producer for 60 Minutes. Jules Naudet is the co-director. He and his brother are the filmmakers behind the award-winning CBS documentary 9/11. We're pleased to have both of them. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, quickly before we talk about what we just saw, how did this come about, this film?
Well, as documentarians and journalists, I think that you see a closed door like the CIA, and that's the ultimate challenge. Is could we get all 12 living CIA directors to talk with us about the rules of engagement? What's the mission of CIA? How far should CIA go to keep us safe? It began with the idea that we would try to get all 12. To our delight, it was one at a time. George H.W. Bush was the first, and he insisted on being a part of the program. And George Tenet was the last holdout, but he finally came around.
And the answer to the question is, with that kind of intelligence, why didn't something happen is?
Well, everybody talks about that famous August presidential daily brief, bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. The July 10 meeting, that pales in comparison to the importance of that July 10 meeting. There was a drumbeat of threats from al-Qaeda. The problem was that it wasn't specific and actionable. I think what's new about this, even though George Tenet has written about it in his book, Cofer Black says, it wasn't clear. It could have been here. The attacks could have been here in the U.S. But as Gina Bennett says, so then what do you do? Do you shut down the airports? George Tenet says that he does not feel, for the record, George Tenet does not feel that the White House ignored his warnings. What he says is it was probably too late. You would have to, as he put it, button down the airports, button down the buildings, change your visa policies. And at this point, 2 of the hijackers were already here, as we now know.
I mean, there is a very clear line coming from the CIA in this documentary, and as well as books that they have published, that this was not a failure of intelligence, September 11th. There were, Michael Morell's book details months and months of PDBs, which are the daily briefings that the president gets. This July meeting that you so dramatically describe with Cofer Black telling Condoleezza Rice, they are coming for us. Why wasn't something done? And why didn't the CIA go back to the White House after something wasn't done and say, come on, let's do something?
Well, I think the CIA felt that they did come back again and again. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think, it's not their days of the rogue agency is no longer what it is. I think they play by the rules of listening to giving their marching orders by the president. And when the presidents don't listen, or at least do not have enough intelligence to be able to make that decision. But I think it goes back to what actually Michael Morell said, that it was not a failure of intelligence. I think he feels that it's a national failure.
Right.
We could never have implemented what needed to be implemented before 9/11 because people were not ready for it. So,
what was fascinating to me is that they were all so candid, guys.
Yeah.
All of the directors that you talked to were so candid, and there seems to be some disagreement about what the mission is of the CIA, even among the directors. You agree, Chris?
We called it a battle for the soul of the CIA. There really is a kind of existential crisis going on at the CIA, and we were stunned to discover just how passionate the CIA directors were in their disagreements with one another. For example, when David Petraeus took over as CIA director, Michael Hayden took him aside, one general to another, and said, never before in the history of CIA has it become such a paramilitary organization. And that comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of intelligence gathering if you become too fixated on that. Bob Yates pointed out, imagine how much different the world would be if we had not gone into Iraq. That was an analytical failure. You pay a price when you get seduced by this world of covert paramilitary.
A secret army.
Yeah,
a secret army.
The impression was that when Petraeus became CIA director, that he would accentuate that. But that's not the fact. He did not accentuate it, did he?
Well, as it turns out, interestingly, lethal drone strikes, which of course the CIA to this day doesn't officially acknowledge, but which the directors talked to us about, lethal drone strikes increased dramatically under
clearly lethal
President
drone acts
Obama.
did, yes, clearly.
And that was over a period of about a year.
But
under
paramilitary
Petraeus, they started
operations generally
to come
are
down.
considered to be, where you have men on the ground, men and women on the ground trying to achieve a military objective.
Yeah.
But that also goes back, I think, to the point of what is coming out much more now is what happened in Paris. There's a lot of the former directors complaining that we're killing people too much, but we're not capturing them. Capturing people is messy. We've seen it with the black sites and renditions and the EITs. What do you do once you have them, but at the same time?
Thank you so much. It's great to have you. We're out of time. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Jules.
Pleasure.
The Spymasters in the Crosshairs premieres Saturday, November 28th on Showtime, a division of CBS.
It's amazing.
And we'll be right back.
So amazing.
Thanks so much.